Hey guys, it is Brian Hilliard here, author of the best-selling book Networking Like a Pro, and I am here with my good friend Marcia Whyte. She is coming out of Knoxville, Tennessee. That is the long state to our west. Marcia, thank you so much for stopping by. We appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here with you. I'm glad to catch up with you.
Yes, it has been a minute. Marcia and I met probably about, I would say, closer to 10 years ago. I mean, it's
Yeah.
been a while. And she is, like I said, out in Knoxville. I'm out here in North Carolina. And Marcia is a business coach that specializes in the client experience. And, one of the things, Marcia, when we kind of reconnected and talked a little bit off air, we were talking about this idea of, we have a lot of coaches that listen, right? There are a lot of coaches that are listening here today, and they have this idea of doing good work. So they do good work. They're good coaches. They're doing all these things, but what happens is maybe they're not able to turn that into as much referral business as they'd like.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're not able to get as many clients, on the back end of that good work as they would like. And what you're saying is, listen, you can turn that actually into a legitimate, you can turn your good work, service work, into a legitimate marketing business revenue generating activity. But you're saying that there is one thing that people need to keep in mind, and that is the client experience. So what we're going to do is we're going to unpack that a little bit here for guys today, and I am just super, super fired up. So tell us a little bit, just in your own words, this client experience. Give us a feel. I mean, obviously you and I talk, but give these guys a feel for what the heck we're even talking about.
Okay, client experience is the sum total of what it's like to do business with your brand. Because if you're even remotely interested in statistics, it's interesting to me that I kind of nerd out in this respect on these. Over the last few years, these figures have kind of held steady. 68% of consumers, whether those consumers are corporations or individuals, say if they if they have a bad experience with a brand, they're not going to do repeat business with them. They can, consumers vote and speak with their dollars. Now, 68% is really high if you think about that. That's almost 3/4. Versus those who are made to feel like they matter past the, however you pay them, whether it's a PayPal, whether it's a contract, whether it's a check, however it is. Somewhere between 80 and some studies have shown as high as 90% of those same consumers, corporate and individuals, say they absolutely will and actually do repeat business with the brands that make them feel like they matter more than the checkbook or the bottom line. And so the customer experience, and let me say this for your listeners, I don't care, it does not matter whether you call them customers, clients, patients, patrons, passengers, guests, or members. It's the people you serve, all right? We can play semantics any time of the day, but the bottom line is whoever's paying you for whatever it is you provide, that's who we're talking about. People want to know that you not only have a sense of what you're doing, but what it's like to experience you in full regalia. So that comes from, I have a little course that it's, one of those little self-taught, self-paced courses. And it's called the FAQs of the client experience. It's findability. Are you easy to find? Accessibility. Is it easy to get in touch with you? Then you have to have quality about the way you do your work, and you have to provide the solutions. So it's not talking about frequently asked questions. It's the sum total of from the time they're looking for their problem to be solved through and including identifying you as the problem solver or the potential problem solver, investing with you, and then everything from there. It's the entire kit and caboodle. It's the whole enchilada, whatever idiom or cliche you're comfortable with. But it's not just, we'll get into that in a few minutes, I know, but it's different from customer service, and I know that's going to lead to another question, but we'll get
Yeah,
to
no question about that. Let me stop you there though, because you make a good point, and you made several good points actually. I think a lot of times as coaches, we kind of think, and obviously you're in this as well, we kind of think, oh, well, as long as I do good work, like this should work out. It's almost like, and you correct me on this if I'm wrong, and that's fine. It's almost like the old EQ versus IQ, folks. So the IQ is a conversation about intelligence intellectually.
yeah,
EQ is a conversation about emotional intelligence. I know you know this. So,
yes,
so almost like what I'm hearing you say is that the client experience and being cognizant of the client experience, how is it that people feel when talking to you? How is it that prospective clients feel when engaging you? Are you easy to do business with? Does it seem like you care? Like that's a
yes,
big one. That's a big one. Does it seem like
absolutely,
you care? Does it
absolutely.
seem like you're just a number? How does it feel to be that? And it sounds like what you're talking about is really kind of energizing this with the business equivalent of emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. Because here's the thing, Brian, what we've learned is they've been talking about this for the last couple of decades. Client experience is going to be the new competitive battleground. Well, they were like, by the year 2020, that's going to be the case. Well, guess what? It's 2020. And it
Right.
has been, you're always going to have some price only buyers. All right. But your real value in the market, in your marketplace space, is the sum total package. Listen, was it Maya Angelou that I think was attributed with that saying, people will forget what you said and forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel.
That's right.
That is really what the client experience is all about. Back in 1998, I believe, so we're talking a century ago.
Right.
um,
Before the internet. That's what the kids call it.
exactly, before the internet. Um, Dell Computers literally put together a client experience council, an internal council. They didn't say anything to anybody, but what they did was it's now called journey mapping, but they assigned these people within their organization to actually map everything that a client or potential client goes through up and to the transaction phase where there's an investment made, and then beyond that, so that they could keep a better handle on not only getting business, but keeping that business. And this is something that, from an entrepreneurial perspective, we have had that kept from us, or we have ignored it because they buried it and we haven't even known to look for it.
That's a great point. Because when you're talking about maybe we've hit our first action item for our listeners here today, which is and I might take a look at this myself. That's a really good idea, the journey. And it's so the first action item maybe for our listeners is, what is it like when somebody is first engaged with you? What is it like when they first come into contact with you? And if it were me, I would be looking like, let's just talk social just for a conversation. Okay. So what does your profile look like? What it really comes down to, let's go for the whole thing. What does the invite? Let's say it's on LinkedIn just for conversation.
Yes.
Let's say it's an invite. What does that sound like? Okay. What does your profile look like? Okay. Then when you get in touch with them and they connect, what is that like? All right. And then if you do decide to kind of have some engagement, how does that feel? And then what does your content look like when you're making posts, right? We're talking about LinkedIn right now, but how does that feel?
But even on other platforms as well. Yeah. I mean, LinkedIn is strictly business, but entrepreneurs usually have to spread ourselves out.
Right. Facebook too.
And so we look, and here's the thing, it needs to be congruent. It doesn't need to be identical,
Good
but
point.
It needs to be congruent, and it needs to be relevant and make
Good
sense
point.
no matter who because every audience, every platform has a different audience.
Right.
It still needs to be as relevant and as valuable, as possible.
That's a great point. So action item number one for those of you guys tuning in is definitely look at the journey. Okay. Start, and we kind of kind of map that out a little bit for you. Definitely look at the journey and see what it is that people are, how people are feeling a certain thing. Action item number 2, in my opinion, is determine what words you want people to associate with you. I actually did this in a little different way, Marcia. Like you're doing it from a really organized way. I just kind of like, so,
as long as we get to the same place, it's okay. It's like the left brain, right brain argument, right?
So from my perspective, and I'll tell listeners this too, if this will help. You know what I did? I just started paying attention more to how people described me. So this is what I did. Now, okay, so I just listened to what people use to describe me. They described me as being warm, thoughtful, sharp, high energy. Like these are just some terms that people have used. And I'm like, okay, I like all of these. So then what I decided to do, so this is also a way that you can do this. What I then decided to do was I accentuated that.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. I'm a big sports fan. I watch a lot of NBA. And one of the things that happens, especially in the playoffs, when you're playing against better teams and progressively better defenses, is until they're able to stop you running a play, they will run it to death. They will run it for 2 weeks straight. Until you stop it, they're going to keep bringing it up. So the reason I bring that up as an example, or as kind of a comparison, is it's very similar to that. Once I realized that those were warm, thoughtful, energetic, sharp, once I realized that those were my plays, I ran them to death. I would go and do, like when I'm doing my presentations, I made sure I was more upbeat. When I was talking to people, I made sure I asked better questions. Like I took what was natural and made it intentional. And to your point, then that became, I didn't know this language at the time, but then that became the experience.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Right? And now
you maintained a degree of professionalism, because here's the thing, at the end of the day, none of this makes sense. We can sit here and wax eloquently, but none of this makes sense if you're not solving the problem.
That's exactly right. That's a really good one. So let's get into our next point, which is this difference. I know we talked about this earlier. We talked about the difference between the client experience and customer service. Yes. And there are some coaches who I'm thinking maybe are listening and they're like, you know what, this sounds great, but I do great service. I get back to people on time and I return my calls and I return emails, which just reminded me I need to return an email actually, but I do these things, right? And I need to be able to, I'm going to actually write that down, make sure I get that email back.
I'm so glad I could help you today.
So, it's like this idea of I do these things, but you're saying, well, hold on there, Sparky. There are some things that transcend, I believe you would use that word, the service, and get more into the experience. Unpack that a little bit for us, if you don't mind.
Well, let me say this in a very, can I just be a little raw? Okay.
Sure, as long as it's PG-13.
Can I come? Oh, I'm not going to be like vulgar or anything.
Okay.
No. No, what I was going to say is the best way I can describe this is, how can I put it? I'll just shoot it out there. If you don't have customers, if you cannot get a person through the discovery phase, or I call it the findability and accessibility phase, to and through the transaction phase, which is when they hire you, however that process plays out, you have no customer, client, patient, patron, passenger, guest, or member to give service to.
Right.
And so all of the stuff before, all of the things during and afterwards is the sum total of the experience. The service is a component of it. But there are so many things that go into, knowing how to put together strategically and practically a great experience. That's why big brands and I'm sure Dell wasn't the only one, but they're the first they're one of the most well-known brands. They know they have gazillion and 33, as I'm fond of saying, meetings about this stuff. They study this stuff, and that's why they became the powerhouse. Because think about it, even a big global brand like Amazon started in somebody's garage, but it was through walking himself, and I don't know that he did it as strategically as I'm suggesting, but
Right.
he
Basis
had
you're
to be
talking about.
looking at, there's metrics. You know what I
Right.
mean? That's one of the things that I teach. I have a course called, the ABCs of client experience. All right, I do a lot with alphabets, it's
Right.
my
That's
mom
fine.
was a teacher, so but here's the thing: you have to know what your metrics are that are important, so that you have something to measure, because what gets measured gets managed. And
Okay, so let
so,
me stop you. Let me stop you just
yeah,
1 second right there, because I'm sorry. That's a great point. That's maybe action item number 3, by the way, which is take a look at what it is in your journey. So back to the journey, and then
yes,
take a look inside of your business and what is it that you want to measure. Whether it is, most people measure business, which they should, but there should be other things, which is what you're saying. Maybe,
yes,
maybe you do start measuring referrals. Maybe you do start, like one of the things that I measure that I think is a function. We talked about this as a function of client experience. I measure. I do measure repeat business. I
mhm,
take a look at the people who are working with me and people who have worked with me either one-on-one or small group. 50% chance of working with me again, straight up.
yes,
That's over
yes,
years. Okay.
which
So
is
you want,
excellent, which is excellent
yes,
for an entrepreneur.
right, right. So you want to be measuring these kinds of things. I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No,
just that was
no, no, go ahead.
item number 3, which is think in terms of what you want to measure, because to your point, what gets measured is what gets increased. But you were talking about the difference between service and the experience, and I
Service is
apologize.
actually taking care of the client. So that's
Okay.
really kind of an intentional hands-on thing. But that's because the assumption is you have the client. But the experience is what makes it possible
Right,
to have the client.
right,
All right.
right,
So I mean, and people can say, well, you're splitting hairs. No, it's really different. There's the thing called journey mapping, which is
right.
something that I teach, where we talk about, and it's a lot of people want to argue that it's SOPs. No, it's not SOPs. SOPs, for those who are maybe new entrepreneurs, are standing operating procedures. It is similar to, but it talks about your entire process. A journey map is something that every customer, client, whatever you call them, is going to go through. You should know exactly where they are on each bit of the journey on the way to becoming a client. And on the, see, SOPs only come into play after you've earned the
After
business.
the fact. That's exactly right. It's after the fact. And you could also say, and you tell me if you agree with this, Marcia, the client experience, that's also an after the fact conversation as well, in my mind. So like if I'm thinking of it as 3, I'm still with this journey because I like this concept. If I'm thinking of it in terms of 3 major kind of stages, this is how I'm thinking of it. You have before they become a client, and there's
Mhm.
all of this has an experience, and that's fine. You have the client itself, right? Then
Right,
you
the
get in.
transaction, I call it the or investment phase.
Okay. Okay. So you're in this investment phase where you're actually working with the person, and that's where servicing comes in, which is also fine. And now here's a I think a good point. You also have after they've decided to work with you, and then after, you do 5 sessions, 7 sessions, 3 months, whatever, as coaches, that's who's listening. So after X number of sessions, they're now in this phase. I actually just think of that as an inactive client, to be perfectly honest with you. And I want an experience to be associated with that. So like what I'll say personally is I'll be like, hey, listen, stay in touch. I'll make a point to do a check-in call. I had one person who I invited to a Facebook Live. You know what I mean? I could do better at this, to be honest with you, but like you have to be able to have that in your head, intentionality.
Right.
Otherwise, I think you would agree, if you're not coming from that philosophical standpoint of continuing to better the experience, I think it's hard to get repeat business personally.
Absolutely. It's the follow-up process. That's part of the experience, because, okay, you can solve their problem, but you ought to somewhere in that, 6-week program, 3-month program, whatever it is, you ought to have been able to hear. And when I say hear, what was said and what was not said, that
Right.
gives you a clue as to what's next steps.
I love that. And we're back to the EQ because that's an emotional intelligence conversation. All right, listen, let me ask a couple more questions here of you if you don't mind. So you are you're in Knoxville, Tennessee. We have some international listeners as well. So that's on the Southeast here in the United States of America. Tell us a little bit about how you maybe got started or what kind of prompted you to kind of do this, because this is like awesome in terms of what you've been covering. What kind of fired you up and made you decide this was something that you wanted to really jump into, if you don't mind us asking?
Oh, absolutely not. I wrote a book about my journey.
Okay.
And it was my first book, and it was actually a bestseller. But let me just give you the Cliff Notes version for the sake of
Okay.
time. And Brian, I was in there when we first met. I was still in that career. I had a career in professional sales where I sold business services, all right?
Okay.
And very specific business services, but very necessary, unfortunately. And I was getting more referrals and more reference letters and things than the rest of the team, including the manager, combined, all right, on the walls and whatnot, because I was truly in relationships with people. Well, fast forward a few years, I won awards and all of that, but at the end of the day, sorry, business is business, and it hurt really bad when my husband suffered a severe health crisis, all right, and
Mm.
I found out that as long as I was producing, I was needed, I was loved, I was, wanted. But when I needed them, they weren't there. And so I had to make the choice, do I dance, do I leave with the one who brung me to the dance? Or do I just stand there, like a wallflower hoping someone's going to pick me? And I was taught to leave with the one who brung me.
Got there with, yeah.
And I'm so thankful that I did, because as I think you're aware that my husband actually lost that battle.
Oh,
And
I did
and
not.
oh well, yeah, it's been a few years now, but here's what I learned. He and I had a conversation when I finally got the nerve to tell him that I had left, because it was just time, and he said, among other things, the 8 words that changed my life. Because I said to him, what am I going to do, baby? We've got, the mortgage to pay. Those doggone kids want to eat, every day, sometimes more than once a day, those kinds of things. And he said, start your own business. And I said, doing what? He said, teaching people how to treat people in business, because you're very good at it. And there's a reason why you have those letters of recommendation, you have those referrals, you have those long-standing relationships.
Right.
And that's a skill that is missing,
Right.
because by this time we've had technology, so we're becoming
Right.
more separated and more fragmented. He said, and I said, do you think there's a market for that? He said, absolutely. And I said, do you think I can do it? And he said, these are the 8 words: trust your gut, trust the process,
Right.
trust God.
That's right.
And that's what I did. And this whole business is dedicated to him. And that's where I came up with the word gratitude speak. Because
Okay.
there's a language all its own, Brian. And to your listeners, we have medical jargon, we have computer coding, we have legalese.
Right.
Gratitude speak needs to be a language practiced and spoken,
Right.
which is the client experience.
That is awesome. And I think a lot of times when you have people who are trying to be successful, they're not really sure what they need to be doing in order to move forward. And one of the first things they can be doing, so maybe this is action item, I think number 4 or 5, which is take a look at your business, take a look at your coaching practice. And first of all, I would be taking a look at your referrals. I would be taking a look, okay, here's another matrix. We were talking about a matrix. Take a look at your social proof. Do you have people who are actually doing videos and giving you written testimonials? Do you have people who are open to getting, and saying, yeah, you know what, this guy or gal or whatever did a great job? So these are some different measures that you can be taking a look at. And I'll tell you what I have found, and I think you would agree here too, is that when you have a intentionality, because that's really the theme that I'm picking up from all of this. When you have a intentionality behind it and you have some structure and you put some of these things into place, like that's when you become more successful. Not
Absolutely.
because you became better at what you did or do, but, and here's the point, but because people feel better having done it with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right. Well, tell these folks where they can find you, Marcia. You've got like a website or something like that. Where can we
The
run you
website
down?
needs a lot of revamp. So there is a blog on the website. So please don't
Okay.
judge me on that. It's in the works. Finding and hiring someone who sees my vision has proven to be a little bit more difficult than I
It
anticipated.
always
But
is, actually.
but
I don't know.
I'm on LinkedIn under
Okay.
Marcia Whyte. Now, my name is spelled Marcia, and my last name is spelled Whyte. No
Right.
judgments, please. I'm a woman without control over that. The first name came from the parents. The last name came from the hubby. I just was the recipient of it all, okay?
Right. Right.
And then, so I'm on LinkedIn, and on LinkedIn, I also have a gratitude speak page,
Okay.
as I do on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay.
So they can reach me there. If they want to reach out to me and schedule a call, and it's
Yeah.
a complimentary discovery call,
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
all lowercase, bit.ly/speak with Marcia.
Okay. Okay.
bit.ly/speak with Marcia.
Good.
And I respond. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Well, listen, I am so glad we got a chance to reconnect. You know, I was on Facebook and I saw you doing some live, and I was like, oh, let me see what's going on. You know, and
I know her.
and I don't. You know, it's funny because I don't normally. I haven't. I'm doing it more, but in the past I haven't normally been like that. But it was something where I saw that and I was like, oh yeah, let's reconnect. I'm glad we got a chance to talk, and I'm glad the listeners got a chance to take some notes.
Absolutely.
Learn some good stuff. All right. Well, that is Marcia. My name is Brian. We appreciate your time, and we want to say so long, take care, and you guys have yourselves a great day.